And I welcome you all and our guest, Ambassador Riva Ganguly. So shall I start again? So good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to today's session, and I welcome our today's guest, Ambassador Riva Ganguly Das ma'am, to the Annual Fest of Kartavya, Junoon 2022. Our today's moderator will be Dipali, and Dipali, you may start the event.
कहते हैं सफल होने के लिए जिद्दी होना बहुत जरूरी है। अगर तुम चलने को तैयार हो तो तुम्हारे सामने सब कुछ झुकने को तैयार हो जाएगी। Celebrating the same determination efforts, the Kartavya, the Civil Services Society of Kirorimal College, welcome you all to the annual fest Junoon. Founded in 2017, Kartavya endeavors to provide a collaborative learning ambience to all its learners, which is emblematic of our principle as spirit corps, a feeling of pride and mutual loyalty shared by the members of group. Junoon, our annual fest is the reflection of same enthusiasm and culmination of hard work of each and every member of Kartavya. As a part of Junoon, this is our second event of the fest. So greetings everyone. I, Dipali, the executive member of Kartavya, welcome you all to the panel discussion on the topic Women in Indian Foreign Service, Gendering Diplomacy and International Negotiation. It's my honor to introduce our esteemed panelists for the session. Our first panelist is Ambassador Riva Ganguly Das. She is an Indian civil servant who belongs to Indian Foreign Service cadre. She is the former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh and former Director General of Indian Council of Cultural Relations. It's our honor to have you here, ma'am.
It's a pleasure to be with all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. And our second panelist is Ambassador Veena Sikri, who was an Indian diplomat. Currently, she is a professor at Jamia Millia Islamia, and she even held various positions as Indian High Commissioner in Bangladesh and Malaysia, and other prestigious positions in India's Ministry of External Affairs. Currently, she is not here. She will be joining within 20 minutes due to certain urgent issues. So women account for only about 16% in Indian Foreign Service and only 18% to the top positions with the embassies around the world. Ranjana Kumari, director of the Center for Social Research, spoke on how Indian foreign policy should become a more gender inclusive and adopt a concept of feminist foreign policy framework. There is a kind of misconception that women tend to veer away from what exactly is described as hard issues of security. But shouldn't we question ourselves, कि क्या सचमुच hard issues still exist? Soft issues still exist? So everything from health, human rights, women and child trafficking, economic and political migration, or be it the conflicts, all these issues impact the security of nation in one way or the other. And all of these are not at all these softer issues. And it is important that the women voices must be heard in these aspects much more. So with this, I would like to start the session, and I would just want to mention certain protocols during the session. First, kindly mute yourself during the session. Only unmute when asked to do so. We will be taking the question towards the end of the session. तो आपको जो भी सवाल हैं, आपसे अनुरोध है कि कृपया उन सवालों को चैट बॉक्स पर लिख दें और प्लीज मेंशन द स्पीकर टू whom you want to ask the question. And please try to turn on your videos if possible to make the session more interesting. With this, I would like to invite our first panelist, Ambassador Riva Ganguly Das ma'am, to come and keep her point of views on the topics about how international affairs and stakeholders can reach out to women representation from the very grassroots level, implementation of gender mainstreaming strategy in diplomacy, and role of women leaders in uncertain decade of 21st century. The stage is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me. I think you have selected a very interesting topic, and congratulations to the Civil Services Society of Kirorimal College for thinking of issues which are of concern to young people like yourselves. I'm actually extremely delighted to be participating in this. I'm myself from Delhi University. I'm from Delhi Shriram College, and I hold DU very close to my heart. You've given me three subtopics. On the first subtopic, how international affairs stakeholders can reach out to women representation from grassroots. For this, I will just go a little bit into what is involved in the nitty-gritty of diplomacy. Now, typically diplomacy, as we see it and as we study, is relations between states. In our mind, we look at diplomacy as state-to-state relation, government-to-government relations, through which relations, and we diplomats, diplomacy, mind you, is one of the tools of state-to-state relations. There are other tools also of state-to-state relations, and it is unfolding right in front of our eyes in the case of Ukraine and Russia, where diplomacy is being given a shot, but something else is happening. So in today's very changed world, diplomacy has become very multifaceted. It is no longer restricted to state relation. There are enormous number of stakeholders who are involved, because diplomacy itself has developed several new pillars, which I would say are more in keeping with the modern times. So you have today what we call the economic diplomacy, which means diplomacy between businesses, which is a very integral part of your diplomatic objectives. We as diplomats do a lot of economic work. We do a lot of economic diplomacy because we want to push the interests of our companies, our economic interests abroad. We have something called development partnership. Now, development partnership is, basically development assistance. India, as you know, is not a traditional donor country. We believe, we've always believed in South-South cooperation, and over a period of time, today we've developed into a country with considerable, portfolio in terms of what we do in the development field, from providing lines of credit at easy interest rate to actual outright assistance grant to technical cooperation, as we call it, which is and capacity building, which is you may be aware that thousands of scholarships are given by Government of India for foreign students to come and study in India. And in the COVID times, and in otherwise also, we provide a lot of humanitarian assistance. So all of this, the humanitarian assistance, technical cooperation, capacity building, lines of credit, all of this is part of the diplomacy. So when we are talking about reaching out to stakeholders and women representation, it goes without saying that without doing that, all these objectives that states have, that governments have, will not be possible. Take the example of climate change. It is one of the major global issues. It's an issue on which every country is concerned, and there's a lot of global diplomacy going on it. But you cannot even imagine doing, really thinking of doing climate change, and with it, the other issues like sustainable development, economic growth, etc., without an outreach to women's representation. And so I think I will not go any further on your first subtopic. I will, once we end, in case anybody has anything to ask, I'll go into that. Implementation of a gender mainstreaming strategy for diplomacy. Now, gender mainstreaming in diplomacy has been an objective of, as far as Indian diplomats are concerned, we've come a long way from a time when, married women were not allowed to join the foreign service. And if you got married, you had to resign. And everybody knows about Miss Muthamma, who had to go to court to get her promotion. But we are much better off today. In my 35 years in the foreign service, in the Ministry of External Affairs, I have never, ever, I would say, come across a situation where I felt that, XYZ happened to me because I was a woman. In fact, at a senior position, I've had senior positions in the last few years. And whenever we choose people for a particularly tough job or a difficult job, we always look at merit. I have never heard anybody say this is too hard for XYZ woman to do. So I think that that is very clear. Women, mainstreaming of gender equality in diplomacy is very much, something that we firmly believe in. And in the MEA, initially you mentioned about the low number of women in the foreign service. I think that's because of a perception issue. And it is felt, a lot of people, there are two perception problems here. One perception problem is that the subject matter of diplomacy is so tough that you cannot handle it. And this is something that needs demystification. This is something on which we need to have more and more conversation, so that young women get to know that it is not, something so tough that you cannot handle. Women can handle anything in today's world, and in any world for that matter. The other perception is a perception about personal life. Many people feel that, the life of a diplomat, life of a foreign service officer is very tough. I think, it depends upon the angle from which you are looking at tough. Foreign service per se is tough, whether it's for a man or a woman. Moving from one country to another every 3 years, and having children who don't get to make friends, it's a very tough life, but it has so many positives to it. So I think the solution to this is having more conversation and demystifying the foreign service as a career for youngsters, and it is as tough as any other job, and particularly in the government. Going a little more on the question of gender mainstreaming, you would be aware that, the United Nations system, which is the multilateral system, has been in the forefront of gender equality. And starting from 1947, if I'm not mistaken, when the Commission on Status of Women met for the first time, the UN system has taken a lot of steps for standard setting in terms of, gender awareness. And a lot of conventions have, state parties have agreed to a lot of conventions of this. I would like to only mention two. One is the ILO Convention on Equal Pay for Equal Work, and the other major convention, which is called CEDAW in short, which is the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It is a legally binding convention. If you're a member of the convention, you have to give periodic reports and a specialized body. And there is a full mechanism there which looks at your report and gives you comments on what you still need to do. Within the UN system, the Beijing Declaration and the Plan of Action were very key sort of steps that the global community took for to mainstream gender equality. And these are excellent. The architecture for gender equality on gender mainstreaming is all there. Beijing Declaration was adopted by consensus by 189 countries, and there is a mechanism in place to see its implementation. And finally, the UN system had a lot of bodies to look at gender mainstreaming, and finally there is now something called the UN Women. You perhaps know that one of our own, Mrs. Lakshmi Puri, was the deputy executive in UN Women, deputy executive director in UN Women. And she's a foreign service officer, and she played a very important role in UN Women. So I think with that, I will move on to your third point that you'd mentioned, which is about role of women leaders in an uncertain decade in the 21st century. I think, both men and women bring in the same sort of caliber, capacity, and abilities to the table. Diplomacy requires some very special skills. nobody's really born with those skills. It is over a period of time that, you get a rigorous training, then you develop certain skills of your own, and you, in terms of how you behave with your counterparts from other countries and your interaction, all of it depends upon the training that you get and the experience that you gain and what you learn from the experience. A lot of people may have experience, but they learn nothing from it. So learning from experience is also something, it's important. So I think, but having said that, I must add that women do bring in something a little extra to the table, which I would say is, sort of natural empathy. I think we are a little different that way from men. We also, because of the circumstances in which we grow up as girls and later as youngsters, we have to learn to multitask. We cannot succeed in life unless we multitask. And I think women learn it better than men because we are just simply thrown into that. And another thing which I feel very strongly about, and it's my completely personal view, which is that, women don't have to stick to a role. Anybody who's in the foreign service, anybody who's broken the patriarchal form of society and the expectations that society has from you, has already broken a role. The role model has already broken traditional role models, which were perhaps, in today's world, nobody really imposes these on you, but it is all around you. I mean, your society, your television channels, advertisement, films, everything sort of tells you all the time, this is what a woman should look like, this is what a woman should do. But when you enter a service like the foreign service, or even for that matter, the civil services, the IAS or whatever, you've already broken that to come there. So after that, women are very easily able to do a lot of jobs where men sometimes, because they have to have a role that society expects from them, they have to follow that. They often, sometimes they find it difficult to do things which are perhaps not, in their mind, what a man's role should be. So I think that way we are very lucky. We don't suffer from these, the need to play a particular role. And, women have, the little add-on that women have is often, as a diplomat, I found that access, ever since I've become of a certain seniority where I've headed an office, we always have, in every capital, we have women diplomats lunch groups or women consul generals lunch group. And these groups are very good because, while we meet as the ambassadors group, while we meet as the group of consul generals, a small subset of women, I'll give you an example of, I was posted in China, and we had a group of women consul generals. We were about, I think, 14 or 15 of us who were women. And we started meeting for lunch every month. And, slowly we realized that, we were bringing in a lot of experience, which we learned from. And at that point, one of the top officials of the party in the city of Shanghai was a lady. So we did a little bit of outreach to her. I took the initiative. I did a little bit of outreach. And then she, on International Women's Day, she invited us for lunch. And it was only she and us. And, it's not easy to get access in China. So the men were very jealous of us. They said, oh my God, how did you guys manage to get access at that level? So, being women has advantages. Sometimes we have direct access to the first ladies of many countries. And now with, the fascination for yoga and all, there is a certain advantage we have. We bring in a lot of grace and a very different kind of skill set to diplomacy. And most certainly, I think in the long run, that's to our advantage. But women are most certainly equipped to handle all the challenges of the 21st century and of this very difficult period that we are going through. I think I'll end here because there's another speaker and I'm sure you people would like to have some interaction. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your great words. And you rightly stated that there is a kind of the need for the demystification. And women have always something extra to serve. I think that fascinated me the most. So with this, like I think since ma'am haven't joined till now, so we can move to the questions which we have in the chat box for you. And first, you may answer those questions. So the very first question is from Neha, and she want to ask that how can domestic policy drive support the feminist foreign policy, and how nation can be helped at home? What do you think on affirmative action programs in Indian foreign services for women?
See, if you are, if affirmative action means sort of some special some special privileges for women, that is certainly not there. And I think as a foreign service woman, we wouldn't like that either. You know, we would like to be seen for what we are as you know, top class professionals. The Indian Foreign Service is very small. We are only 800 plus officers, and you know, it's often said that we do a very tough job. We do a tough job. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But we all do it from the same level. So there is no, you know, no such thing as, there is no reservation for women to start with. And as I mentioned earlier, there is never, I have never seen anybody say that, you know, the flight is coming at 4 in the morning, so let's not send a woman officer. If your job is to do protocol, you'll go at 4 in the morning. That's it, period. If there is an Indian in distress somewhere far away, and you have to travel, you know, 200 kilometers by a train to look at that Indian in distress, no ambassador is going to see whether the concerned officer is a man or a woman. You just pack your bag and go and do your job. So, you know, so that is a short answer to that. As regards your question, the question on you know, domestic policy, and of course domestic policy is very closely involved with foreign policy, and what you do domestically often gets reflected in foreign policy. And you know, especially since I have myself handled economic and social issues in the UN system as a director, we could very proudly talk about all the various initiatives that Government of India has taken from time to time to give you know, empower women. And you know, today's woman in India is extremely confident of herself, and especially not only those who come from privilege, you know, even girls who are from smaller cities, smaller towns, who have for whom you know, the fighting well-defined roles and societal roles is so much more difficult. It's very heartening to see how much confidence they have in themselves, and how much ambition they have to do something with their lives. So the domestic policy prepares the environment or the ecosystem in which we grow, and which gives us the confidence to you know, to seek what we want, to push and to push for our objectives, the what we want from our life.
Thank you, ma'am. So like now I would ask one of my question, like you have just mentioned about the kind of perception which we have about the low numbers of the diplomats. But like apart from these two perceptions, is there any core or the basic value of why women diplomats occupy a disproportionately small number to the higher offices?
Sorry, if I got you right, you're saying that why are we in such small number? Is that the question? Okay. I think you know, it's got to do with the lack of awareness. A lot of people feel that you know, your personal life gets completely ruined if you're in the foreign service, and that you have to constantly move from one country to another, which is not so. You get 3-year postings, and there are many options, many opportunities to also stay in India, stay in Delhi. I mean, of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, External Affairs is in Delhi, so mostly you get posted in Delhi. But that doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to get posted in your home state also, but that will be very briefly. So I think it's mainly lack of awareness and a kind of, feeling that this is too hi-fi and, this is a very alien world. Believe me, diplomacy is not an alien world at all. You do exactly, the one big difference in the foreign service and other jobs in the government is that because of the nature of the job, we tend to do new things every 3-4 years. I mean, even as as late as last year, when I came back from Bangladesh and I became secretary in the ministry, my job profile changed. I learned a new way of working and also completely new subject matter. So I think that's the best part of the foreign service, that you are intellectually pushed, and it's a very stimulating job that you do. And for years, I mean, for all the 35, whatever, if you join young, you may even do 40 years in the service, but mostly people do 35, 36, 37 years in service. You do new things every few years. So it's intellectually extremely stimulating. And it is a misnomer that, you are not fighting wars. I mean, for heaven's sake, as diplomats, and there is nothing so hard about strategic and defense issues that women will find hard to deal with. So I think it's a question of demystification of the service. And I can certainly tell you, after 35 years, for all the young ladies listening out there, that it's a great, great profession to be in. You see the world, you learn about other cultures, and you open your mind on a constant basis. So it's a wonderful service to be in.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Just sorry to interrupt you, and we have Veena ma'am with us. We welcome you, ma'am.
Okay.
Is ma'am audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome, ma'am. We welcome you to the event organized by Kartavya. So we have Veena Sikri ma'am with us, and she is our second panelist. And as we just introduce her, I would just like to repeat about her introduction a bit. So she is currently a professor at Jamia Millia Islamia, and she even held several positions as the Indian High Commissioner in Bangladesh and Malaysia, and several other prestigious positions to the India's Ministry of External Affairs. It's our pleasure to have you here, ma'am.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be here. Great pleasure.
Yes. So, ma'am, we would like to hear from you. We would just like you to enlighten us with your precious words on the equal opportunities of the women's participation in diplomacy, stereotypes and obstacles, and the traditional roles of class ceilings and gender culture and soft power. So, ma'am, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would like to really send my greetings to Riva, to my dear friend Riva, who is one of our very brilliant diplomats and now holds a very high position as secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. So I think, if at all, Riva epitomizes the success of Indian women in diplomacy and reaching the highest. She has broken every glass ceiling and reached the post of secretary. So that is a very, very good thing. But I would like to say that let me give a very brief background. Firstly, we in India, after independence, a little bit take it for granted, because our constitution has promised us complete equality and complete, lack of discrimination against anything, including gender equality. And so we think that everything is okay, but it was not always like that. And I must tell you that when I joined the service, I found this, and I joined in 71, which is like, you can say that it's like almost 25 years after we were independent. But even then, there were a lot of discriminatory rules against women joining. For example, in 1971, when I joined, a married woman could not join the foreign service. So it was an amazing rule. I mean, there was absolutely no reason for it, but that had been the rule. And in fact, in the 25 years before that, several of our other senior colleagues, Rama Mehta and others, had to leave the service because they wanted to get married or something like that. So I remember that this rule remained on the books and nobody even removed it. So that was the first thing that when I joined, I said that we have to fight for this rule. And the second, immediately after that came up another rule that when you want to get married, when a lady officer wants to get married, you have to apply for permission to get married. But a male officer never had to apply for permission to get married. And the male officer only had to inform about his marriage, whereas the lady officer had to apply for permission to get married. And, you were given a very bombastic letter in reply saying, yes, you can get married, but in the future, you may be called upon to resign if it clashes with your work or something like that. So that also we had to fight against. So that was another, big thing. Why 25 years after independence, why are these rules there? Why this discrimination between men and women? That was the main point. There should be no discrimination. So when we went on our first posting abroad, then we came up against another discrimination that for husband and wife posted abroad, equal pay was not given. Equal pay and allowances were not given. Whereas if two IAS officers or two any other civil service officers were posted together in Delhi, or any other place in India, they were given two sets of pay and allowances, including whether you have your DA or whatever it is. But in a foreign mission, it was not like that. So this was highly discriminatory because you can't have a situation where, one person is being discriminated against. So this was a very big battle. This battle on finance, as you can imagine, because it has to go to Ministry of Finance and lots of objections, this took a very long time. And in the first, I would say almost 10 years or so, of my joining the service, it was a difficult battle, a battle which aroused a lot of opposition from different parts of not only MEA, but other ministries and so on. But I must say we won that battle, and now there is absolutely no discrimination. Rather, I would say that it's very important that if you have a husband and wife couple in the foreign service, posting them in the same place makes a lot of sense because, financially it's very, for the government, very good because, you're saving on one house, one set of a lot of provisions that you have to make. But other than that, it makes a lot of sense because it gives a very coordinated, effective way of functioning. Apart from these discriminations, which I mentioned right in the beginning, I must say right off that for me, a career in the foreign service is an excellent choice of career for any person in India. It's an excellent choice of career because it is a career that gives you a lot of intellectual satisfaction because you are representing your country abroad. You are, using your intellect, your training, your education to find stronger and stronger arguments to defend your country's interests abroad. Because there will always be some people who will say, India hasn't done this right. They will look down on India and that will be there, but it's very, very satisfying as a career. There's a lot of protection also because when you're staying, whichever place you're staying at, you get the protection and so on. But there is also, if you're interested, one important factor to be comfortable in a career in the foreign service, for man or woman, but equally, especially for women, is that you have to have the basic interest in foreign policy affairs, in knowing languages and other cultures, and in international relations, And this is important because I think that in our education curriculum, that we have for, let's say, school and college, not enough importance is given on contemporary international relations. It's only now that very, paper on international relations has come in many political science courses and in many private universities, they're doing it. But otherwise, I was a professor in Jamia Millia Islamia. I'm not there now. I wanted to correct you on that. And I remember looking at their syllabus and I found it's very antiquated. It had not been modernized at all. So I think that it is very important for each of us to understand and appreciate foreign relations, not only if you're interested in foreign service, in any career, even if you're going to be, in the corporate sector, even if you're going to be a businessman, you're going to do exports or imports, or even if you're whatever kind, even nowadays, even in medicine, the international dimensions of what you're doing is very important, because that impacts the development. You must know the developments taking place abroad. So this kind of a open-minded view to the world is very important. But having said that, I must add one point here, that this is what Mahatma Gandhi said, that I want the cultures of all the worlds to blow through my home. I will keep my doors and windows open, and I want the cultures of all the world to blow through my home, but I will not be blown off my feet. I will remain rooted in my own culture and civilization. So this is the most important point that I think is, again, an important point that anybody in the normal education curriculum must be fully imbibed with India's culture and civilization and history and our ethos, the Indian way of doing things, the Indian approach, pluralistic, secular society, freedom for everybody to have their own points of view, to express their own points of view. And this is very important. It is there. It is there. I don't think you have any other country in the world where we have such a diverse debates on any subject under the sun. But I think that sometimes a lack of understanding is created because this ethos of understanding what the other person is saying and taking it on board is not there. This is very important in the foreign service when you're dealing with foreigners, because every foreigner will be sensitive. After all, you are a foreigner in another country, you have your own sensitivities. So talking to people in another country has a different ethos altogether. It's a different ethos. It's not like, you're at home, you're talking to your college friend, or you're talking to your, anybody, maybe your brothers or sisters. You're talking to somebody who belongs to another country, and that person is equally proud of his or her own civilization as you are of yours. So your job is to find a meeting ground, to find a bridge where you can express yourself, where you can convey your points of view, and you can persuade the other person that you are, what you are saying is relevant, is important, and find a via media, find a way out. I think, for example, participating in debates is very important to develop your interest in this area. And I think knowing your own country, the states of India, is very important. Now, when you're living abroad, in the first few years, because, having been through college and so on, I did economics and so not much about India that we learned, whether in BA or MA. And we knew a lot about international relations, but I studied for it for the Foreign Service exam. But I felt I don't know enough about my own country. So I spent a lot of time, getting that knowledge. And in years later, when I was Director General of Indian Council for Cultural Relations, and Riva has also held that wonderful post, that is where, I would immerse myself in Indian culture, all the different aspects of Indian culture and where it's from and what it represents. It's not just a music or a dance. It represents something. It represents a thought process. It's a civilizational history is behind it. So basically what I'm saying is that constitutionally, there is no problem with women doing well in diplomacy. B, there have been problems in the implementation, largely put across by a male chauvinist approach, but these have now been overcome. I must tell you, this is a very interesting aside, and Riva, you'll be interested in hearing this, that where C.B. Muttama, who was our senior most, and she was not being given an ambassadorial assignment, and she went to court. And in the court, a very, very senior lawyer of India, arguing on behalf of the government of India, actually put the argument in court, saying, how can we make a lady an ambassador? She has to see all these secret papers, and suppose she tells her husband about it. So, I mean, the court said, but don't you think a male ambassador can also tell the same things to his wife? And we all know that many male ambassadors married foreign wives, So, I mean, so it was bizarre, the kind of thinking that was there. In fact, this is what I feel very strongly about, because now, after leaving the service, I have started a group called the South Asia Women's Network, which brings together women from 9 countries of South Asia, all the 8 SAARC countries and also Myanmar. And when we're looking at the situation in all these 9 SAARC countries, situation of women, we find that the biggest problem is not necessarily the constitution or the rules or the laws. The biggest problem is the patriarchal mindset. It's the patriarchal mindset, no matter how educated you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what position you attain, it's this patriarchal mindset which keeps you in place. And let me tell you, this patriarchal mindset is not practiced only by men, it's practiced by women also. And I can tell you here another very interesting episode about it that doesn't concern the Foreign Service, but it's about a very eminent lady, Indra Nui, who became head of Pepsi. So she tells this, she has recounted this very often. So when she got to know that she's going to become CEO of Pepsi, she said, I won't ring up my mother. Her mother was living with them and the children, looking after the children. Her husband was also there. She said, I won't ring up. I'll go home and tell my mother. So she rushes home, parks her car in the garage, and she goes into the house. Her mother is standing at the top and says, Mom, listen, did you bring the milk? Her mother says. So she says, no, but I've got some. No, go back, bring the milk, and then we'll talk. But then she said, but my husband's car is there. Why don't you tell him? No, he's tired. He can't go. You go and bring the milk and come back, and then we'll talk. So this is the kind of slots into which women are put. This is what we have to fight against altogether. And here in this fight, bringing men and boys on board is very important. In my group, in South Asia Women's Network, we have one very important agenda that whatever we do, we will bring men and boys on board, convince them that of the need for complete equality. Otherwise, we are landing in a situation where because of sexual violence against women, harassment of women, the most educated women are dropping out of the workforce. And do you know that in India today, the female labor force participation is declining. More and more women are getting educated, more and more women are joining civil services, but overall women are not participating in the labor force, they're not working. They're dropping out of the labor force. And why is that happening? Again, it's the patriarchal mindset. Under COVID, actually, if you see, many women have just dropped out of the labor force. They've just not been able to work anymore. And of course, here I must say again that being in a civil service, the government civil service is a very protected position. You do get a lot of, facilities, and you are able to avail of leave and so on and so forth. We're doing all that, but in many other private sector careers, it's not there. And this aspect of sharing the burden of looking after the house by men and women, this is crucial to the success of women. In fact, we are taking this up in our South Asia Women's Network. There's something called women's unpaid work. This is a huge category. And what is unpaid work? Unpaid work is no matter what you're doing, whatever your job is. Riva may be secretary, I may be here, there, everywhere. But at home, the work of looking after the house, looking after the children, looking after the elders, looking after the people who are sick, that falls only on the women. There was actually a time use survey done in India about 2 or 3 years ago, I think 2020, 2 years ago. And they found that the ratio is 5-1. Women are doing 5 times the unpaid work as compared to the men. So the burden is too much. If anything happens in the family, it's the woman who gives up a job and comes and stays at home. So these are the issues that I wish in your society, in Kartavya, you have a duty. Please take up these issues. Because unless you take up these issues, you cannot enjoy the full fruits of the constitutional freedoms and equality that you have. because the situation is not right. The socio-economic situation is not equal for men and women to have equal enjoyment and equal benefit from this situation. This is a very, very important aspect. And I would like to say, coming back to diplomacy, that another aspect that we have, it refers to diplomacy and international conflict resolution situations. And this is very important because we do see that there's so many conflicts all around the world. And there are constantly efforts to solve these conflicts. The thing is that women are not being involved in conflict resolution. Peacemaking efforts, women are hopelessly excluded from it. And I don't know why. There is no logical reason why it should happen. In fact, I know that in my own group, South Asia Women's Network, the women of Afghanistan, they were very upset because all these past 10, 15 years when they were, of course, they were enjoying tremendous freedoms while the Americans were there to look after their security and defense interests. But individually, they were suffering a lot from these kind of, shall I say, these are almost like non-tariff barriers, I would say, because it's not written anywhere, but it's the barrier you face. And one of the big points they were making was that, look, all these peace talks that go on, even their own traditional lawyer jirgas, they have their own traditional methodology of having their kind of parliament or solving issues. Even there, women are hopelessly excluded. So women's role being only in the home, behind the parde ke piche, and, in a very limited way, this is affecting the freedom and safety of women as well, I would say. Whereas if you consider that it's only the men who can be on the streets, then if any woman is there coming back from college, going to college, coming back from work, going to work, she is suffering all kinds of unacceptable forms of violence. So this is an aspect that all of you, because all of you are looking at your careers, the girls are, the boys are, the men are, and when you do this, you must be equal on this aspect. Are we equal? Are we equal? Are we doing this in a non-discriminatory way? What are the difficulties that the women members, I can see so many women members on the screen, taking part, watching, listening. What is it? You have to raise your voice on this. This is your Kartavya. This is your Kartavya, making women aware and bringing men on board, bringing your fellow colleagues, the men and boys, bringing them on board in support of an equal society. I'm just talking of how this, mindsets play an impact. The favoritism for the boy child, So one of our colleagues from Sri Lanka had done a survey, because Sri Lanka is a country very well developed and also very high rate of education. And the women are very, very, they're in every career. From prime minister and president downwards. But Sri Lanka has a large amount of GBV, gender-based violence. Harassment of women, all that is there. So they did a survey on that. Why is it happening? And it's amazing the conclusion they came up with when they, spoke to all the perpetrators. Of course, none of them had been had to face any punishment. When you ask them the reason, why did you do it? Only one reason: because we can. So it's a kind of it's a mental feeling that you have the right to do whatever you want and nobody's ever going to say anything to you. Ye to chheda chhadi hai, ye to aise hi hai. So I think that we have to enable women to play their full role in society. When you join the foreign service and you go abroad, you will see this also there. You have to protect your own self, you have to protect your own interests, and you have to make it very clear that working has to be on the basis of complete safety, security, and equality. So, but to be able to do that, you must first discuss all these now while you are in college, in your society, discuss it, raise it. Say, how can we overcome it? The problems are there, even in the university, everywhere the problems are there. So this will help you. If you can solve it in here, then you get to the next stage of joining the foreign service, the next stage of conflict resolution issues. There also you fight for more women to be represented. And women must have equal representation in all solution-seeking mechanisms that there are. Even if it's in India now, for example, if you look at the situation within the country, there also one of the issues we found, if you talk about malnutrition. Now, it's amazing to know India as a country can grow at 10%. And we will grow. And we have been growing. So as an economy, we're doing well. But when we come down to health and malnutrition, you'll be amazed to know that India has the world's largest number of stunted and malnourished children. Now, it's a shame. And then Prime Minister Modi has got a Poshan Abhiyan, which is very successful, very good. And it is a good program. But again, after 3-4 years of the program, even the latest data, a lot of the indices have improved. But this one on children has not yet improved on malnourished. And my group is saying, and we even told Niti Aayog about this, that look, make women the central point of the solution for this problem. Because women are doing the cuisine in the family. So women are looking after the children. Women will make the food for the children and make sure the children have the food. If they know what they have to feed the children, what is good for their health, what is bad for their health, then, you won't have a problem. But so these efforts to give women her agency, her right, give her the responsibility and see that she will deliver it very well. So I think I'll stop here because you're going to have a Q&A, right? Or are you going to...
Yes, ma'am, we have a... Yeah, sorry, ma'am.
No, please go ahead.
So it was very much nice hearing to you. And ma'am, yes, we at Kartavya surely understand our Kartavya to bring men and boys to on board and just discuss the things on a very expansive and the collaborative session. And yes, it was very great hearing for you. And now we again go back to the Q&A round. And I would request कि आप सभी से अनुरोध है जो भी आपके सवाल हो कृपया chat box में लिख दें. And please mention the name of the speaker from whom you want to ask the question. So till then, we can take the questions from the chat box. And this question is for Riva ma'am. And the question is from Neeraj. Ma'am, he's asking that we can see some countries are moving towards pursuing feminist foreign policy, like Sweden, while countries like Poland anti-gender movement. So ma'am, what reforms should be at a global level should be done to bring gender equity in diplomacy?
Thank you for the question. And ma'am, it's so nice to see you. It's
good.
With Veena Sikri, ma'am, my senior in the Foreign Service. And ma'am, I completely agree with what you said, that society continues to be unequal and that the fight is actually ours.
Yeah.
On this issue of the question that has been asked, that, gender mainstreaming in foreign policy and some countries are ahead of the others. Basically, you see, you can do as much as ma'am just explained. The domestic situation is very important in this case. And really speaking, the Nordics have been very, very forward-looking in terms of women's empowerment. And I remember from my UN days that the diplomats from Nordic countries, particularly Norway and Denmark and all, would always be in the forefront of all the women's issues. They have taken empowerment of women and gender mainstreaming to a completely different level. So I think that's a great example that we have. And India is doing, the Constitution provides for equality. There are a number of legal provisions which provide us our equal rights. But certainly, the actors in this are we ourselves. We also have to play our part. And, as Ambassador Sikri rightly mentioned, that our partners are our, the men, boys, and the youngsters who mental awareness is very important. So I think this is not something which can happen, immediately. Laws are put in place, but implementation of laws and their actual and when laws get implemented, whether they are meeting the objectives for which they have been, in the first place put in place, that these are all questions which take a little time. We've come forward a lot. We have a lot to be proud of, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for comprehending it so beautifully. And now this would be like our last question because ma'am has certain commitments to be followed. So this question is for Veena Sikri, ma'am, and the question is from Vivek Shukla. So ma'am, he is asking that, do you believe that there would have been less conflicts and war in the world if more women were leading the nation and diplomatic relations? As women are the worst sufferers of the war, they naturally tend to avoid the violent conflict.
Yeah, no, I fully agree that, it's not a question so much of a woman being there or a man being there. It's a question of equal participation. Now, you see, what happens is that when you have a situation like in many developing countries, that the woman is not stepping out of the house at all and is confined within the four barriers of the home, I think it does increase the chances of conflict, because you're driven by an adrenaline driven macho approach. Okay, come on, main dikha dunga, main kar lunga, vagera vagera. But that's not the way to find solutions. So you have to temper the effort for solutions by getting a more peaceful perspective as well, and that equal participation of men and women at every stage. In fact, what I fully agree with what Riva has just said about the feminization of foreign policy. But feminization of foreign policy is really more women's participation in the making of foreign policy. But does that mean that you're taking women's concerns on board? This is another matter altogether. Because, for example, let me give you the big example of this in South Asia, in our own region, which is that South Asia as a region is the most successful region in the world in terms of presidents and prime ministers who are women. So India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, everybody, they've had presidents and prime ministers as women. And not for short periods of time, very long periods of time. I mean, it's like for 10, 20 years. Look at Bangladesh. I mean, for the last, I don't know how many decades they've had a woman leader, either Khaleda Zia or Sheikh Hasina. And similarly, you've seen in Sri Lanka, you've seen in India so many years. Has it made a difference to the condition of women? Have the women at the grassroots level improved? Certainly, I think all the laws which are now being implemented on education of women, it's being done. That's good. But has it improved the patriarchal mind? Has it changed the patriarchal mindset about women? No, it hasn't. So it is not a question of women's participation for the sake of participation. You have to change the mindset. You have to have an equal sense of participation, where a woman should not be scared to raise her hand and oppose something that her male boss or male member of the board or somebody has said. And she will not be punished for it, or she will not be, looked down upon for it. So it's a whole change of approach. So mathematical equity, you can say. I mean, I can say that from my time to now, a lot more women are joining the foreign service. A lot more. In my time, it was barely one, sometimes two a year. Now it's 5 or 6 or 7 every year, which is good. As a percentage of the batch, the figure has also gone up, which is very good because women are finding it. But then can you say that because of that, our foreign policy is more gender sensitive? I don't think it has had an impact one way or the other, It's not a factor taken on board, And I know one country, I think in Europe, they said that the only change it made for women's, they used to have this women ministry, this and that. Then finally, they got a woman prime minister, and she said, okay, I will have this ministry in my office. So anything on women's issues, I will handle. And when she started doing that, then it started making a difference, So whether you're a male prime minister or a woman prime minister, you have to give importance to gender issues. And you to respect and accept that gender issues are as important as any other issues. You can't have women being unhappy and, pressurized and being made to do things which they don't want to do. And this is the mindset change that has to come from all of you at college. Because let me tell you one thing, mindsets are already made up. All of you now, in your young 20s and so on. By the time you leave college, it doesn't matter what you do, your mindset is made up. You may go to Harvard or you may go anywhere else, but your mindset will remain the same. You'll learn a lot of things. You'll get a lot of knowledge from your future education. But mindsets are made up from a very young age. So I say that these things about gender equality and gender perspective must come from the school level. It must be in the textbooks in school. And then you have, build up on that at every stage. So what you teach in the first standard is different, second, third, 10th, 11th, 12th. They all, get more and more complex. But the equality of approach has to be there. Otherwise, we've seen in our group, we studied this even, that say in a textbook, so if you have even a mathematical example, the boy child is shown outside playing cricket or, doing something very, very outdoors. And the girl child is shown in the kitchen, helping her mother, cutting vegetables and so on. So the mindset is made right there, This is what the girl is supposed to do. That's what the boy is supposed to do. So the girl feels hesitant. Oh, I want to play cricket, but you know what? I think I'm not supposed to play cricket, So this kind of a big mindset thing is an effort we have to do from day one.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for stating it so beautifully. And it was indeed great hearing from both of you. Due to paucity of time, we are very sorry. We will not be able to take much more questions. And we really had a huge takeaways from like demystifying different aspects to taking men and boys on board. It was indeed a beautiful experience having you both. And with this, I would like to just bring an end to the Q&A session. And now I would like to invite Nikita, the senior executive member of Kartavya, to give vote of thanks.
I would like to thank our guest, Ambassador Veena Sikri ma'am and Ambassador Riva Das ma'am for joining us today, taking time out of their busy schedule. And it was our pleasure to have you both on board today. And I also want to extend the vote of thanks to our principal, Dr. Vibha Singh Chauhan, for allowing us to organize this event. However, she couldn't join us today due to some prior commitments. And I would like to thank our convener, Dr. Vikram Singh Chaudhary, and our teacher from advisory committee, Dr. Rupak Dattagupta, Dr. Akhilesh Bharti, Dr. Mujib Ahmad Khan, Dr. Rupesh Kumar, Dr. Pratibha Madan, and Dr. Benu Gupta. The organizing team of Kartavya also did a great job and organized the event very smoothly and had put so much hard work. So they too deserve a vote of thanks. And last but not the least, the audience who joined us today and made this event a successful one. So I thank you all. Thank you so much.